Well, the United Nations Human Rights Office has voiced concern about growing instances of threats of violence against journalists and human rights activists in Pakistan. It has called upon Islamabad to take immediate and concrete steps, but Pakistan doesn't know what it means by that, to ensure the protection of these journalists. The Human Rights Office has said that it followed with increasing concern numerous cases of incitement to violence online and offline against journalists and human rights defenders in Pakistan, particularly against women and minorities. The Human Rights Office pointed out that last month, a number of Pakistani women journalists and commentators in a joint statement had warned of a coordinated campaign of social media attacks against anyone who was critical of government policies. The UN termed the situation as especially worrying with regards to accusations of blasphemy leveled against some activities, saying such allegations can put individuals at imminent risk of violence. The UN cited where a female Pakistani activist had recently been abused of blasphemy on social media, and police complaints were filed against her after a tweet. Following this, the lady started receiving death threats, and her personal details were also revealed on Twitter. Well, this means another Tuesday, perhaps, on Pakistan, but we definitely will have to talk about this with our panelists. Joining me on the show is Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee, former diplomat, Joyita Basu, editor of the Sunday Guardian, Sumit Peer, political analyst, and Mr. Rajiv Chuni, chairman SOS International. He's a displaced refugee from Pakistan, occupied Kashmir as well. Ambassador Mukherjee, we've been down this road a number of times before. We've spoken of minorities and how the blasphemy law is used, let me rephrase, how it's misused in Pakistan, in fact, to level religious propriety, if I can use that word, against people who don't belong to a certain community. But this still continues. Should anything be made out of this UN observation? Because perhaps in a few months, it's going to be slipped into oblivion.
Actually, Vineet, it's a very serious matter for Pakistan, because Pakistan has always tried to use these United Nations mechanisms against us, just in case they find something, a loophole, or what they perceive as a violation. They use these very same mechanisms. Now, let me explain, since I have actually worked in the Human Rights Commission for 6 years in Geneva, that there are 3 ways in which Pakistan can be really nailed on this one. One is the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which has issued a statement. One is the Human Rights Council itself, which meets 4 times in the year, or whenever there is a gross violation of human rights. Then there is a committee emanating out of a UN convention called the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. That has its own committee. And then you have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which has the Human Rights Committee. And any and all of these committees, when examining Pakistan's record as a state party to these conventions, will issue very stringent language which can be utilized by India and other like-minded countries to corner Pakistan, and actually also to raise it with human rights organizations within Pakistan, because ill treatment of women in Pakistan is an issue which is also debated hotly, perhaps not very effectively because of the deep state within Pakistan. So this is something which the Pakistanis, although they may put a brave face on it, is not good news for them, because when they will go back to perhaps say something about India, they will be reminded about their own heinous record as far as women's rights are concerned, and rights of journalists. And rights of journalists in UN, Vineet, is a very emotive topic because of the Cold War and the way journalists were treated in the East Bloc during the Cold War. So rights of journalists are very zealously protected, and journalist organizations, Vineet, are very, very strong, both in Geneva and New York. So this is not going to be easy for Pakistan to escape. That's why I thought I'll give you the entire background in detail, what all we can do on this matter.
But Sumit, Pakistan is not Geneva or New York. Pakistan is a country which is perhaps a living hell for people who have been born out of a certain circumstance. And this time around, it's not even the minorities we are talking about, Sumit. These are journalists who are trying to bring the government to books, which is trying to, in fact, expose what's really going on in Pakistan. Imran Khan obviously does not want any journalism being done on him because he's failed miserably in all departments.
I think, Vinny, the point here is that what we have to debate right now is that what took UNHRC 70 years to realize this fact. Because it has been happening in Pakistan for the last 70 years. I'll give you an example. This is the only country where persecution of minorities is a national sport. This is a country where a model called Kandil Baloch, if I'm getting the pronunciation right, was killed by her own brother because she posted her pictures on the internet. Where the judge is killed by the bodyguard.
Sumit, if this can happen in Saudi Arabia, if something like this can happen to Khashoggi, then Pakistan by far is even more backwards.
Nothing. I was coming to that. When a judge is killed by by his own bodyguard, we have people who are killed by their own people. But that is what the Pakistan is about. You see, they hang their own Prime Minister Bhutto. He appoints Zewul Haq, he hangs him. Then Zewul Haq's security people place a bomb in a mango basket and blast the Zewul Haq. Then Benazir Bhutto is killed by the Musharraf who appointed Musharraf the day she lands in Pakistan. And Musharraf, to save his life, is running out of Pakistan. And the Supreme Court of Pakistan says if he comes back, hang his corpse for 3 days. That is the reality of Pakistan. We need, in fact, blood, bomb, and blood, bomb, and bullet are their synonyms. The only fourth parameter or the fourth pillar which was missing is this blasphemy law. Now, this blasphemy law is a dart which can be used against anybody in Pakistan, and you can crucify a person. I think that is where even the Chinese get their clue from. And honestly, Vineet, I fail to understand why can't UNHRC see this for the last 70 years when they make such a hue and cry about Kashmir, they make such a hue and cry about Indians. You see from politicians, leaders, military generals, minorities. Vineet, isn't it true the persecution of minorities is a national sport there? Isn't it true they have a SOP from conversion to rape? Isn't it true the most sought out animal or the person in Pakistan is a minority girl who is being abducted, raped, and converted? Why the world is blind to all this? This is happening in Pakistan in front of our own eyes. We know the incidents of Dankana South. We have so many things which are debated. Why now? Why are you waking up now? Because the water has crossed the bridge.
Right. Joyita, interesting to see that, if I may use this word, the Chinization of Pakistan has already started. The insular treatment that is in fact given to journalists and information that is potent and important in China is not revealed or exposed, and perhaps Pakistan is following suit. Joyita, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. The thing is, frankly, I do not have much faith in these United Nations reports and all that, because you see, it's very selective. United Nations approach to all these issues is very, very selective. Look at the way it is not saying anything about China. Just recently, China threw out so many journalists from, New York Times and all. Then all the Australian journalists left because they're fearing for their lives. We know the there's no communication. There's no media except for state media. The rampant torture that happens of people, nothing is reported. So what is United Nations doing about it? And how many years did it take for United Nations to give a damning statement about Pakistan on this? So frankly, maybe action can be taken, initiated against Pakistan, but in real terms, frankly, I really don't think the United Nations has any teeth whatsoever to take on these countries, these rogue countries.
Absolutely. Mr. Choni, what do you make of the situation? Obviously, you've seen the atrocities firsthand. Journalists, in fact, have been targeted in Pakistan for a number of years. Minorities have been targeted for a number of years. But now, the way Pakistan has been, in fact, propagating misinformation about India, real information about Pakistan also has to be put out. And perhaps this is the first instance in recent memories whereby UN, toothless and spineless, has made an observation. But do you think it amounts to anything? So you'll have to unmute yourself. Mr. Chuni, we can't hear you. You'll have to unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead, sir.
पाकिस्तान जन्म से बिगड़ा हुआ देश है। मैं तो ये कहूंगा कि मानवाधिकार खाली मीडिया के नहीं होते, जर्नलिस्ट के नहीं होते, हर एक के होते। और सबसे पहले मानवाधिकारों का हनन हमारा हुआ पाकिस्तान ने जन्म लेते ही सबसे पहले हमारे वहां के हिंदू और सिखों पर हमले किए, जो जम्मू कश्मीर के इलाकों के थे। हमारी जवान औरतों को उठाकर ले गए, हमें गाजर मूली की तरह पाकिस्तान के सैनिकों ने काटा और हमारे इलाके को हथिया लिया और डराकर धमकाकर हमें वहां से भगाया गया। उसके बाद आप देखें, लगातार पाकिस्तान प्रॉक्सी वार हिंदुस्तान के अंदर लड़ रहा है। आप कश्मीर में देखें, अगर कश्मीरी पंडित विस्थापित हुए हैं, इसमें पाकिस्तान का हाथ है। आज यहाँ सीज फायर वायलेशन होती है, आप देख लें कि जहां जहां भी सीज फायर का ऐलान है, वहां पर रोज आए दिन पाकिस्तान वायलेशन करता है और हमारे यहाँ लोग भी मरते हैं और हमारे सैनिक भी मरते हैं। ये क्या, ये वायलेशन नहीं है? ये ठीक है कि वहां के पत्रकारों को आज ये वहां तकलीफ हुई तो वो उठकर खड़े हो गए और यूनाइटेड नेशन के पास चले गए। मेरे एक साथी पैनलिस्ट ने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा है कि तब ये कहां था यूनाइटेड नेशन, जब मेरे राइट्स की वायलेशन हो रही थी। तब ये यूनाइटेड नेशन कहां था, जब हमारे कश्मीरी पंडितों की वायलेशन हो रही थी। तब ये कहां था, जब यहां पर मेरे निर्दोष लोगों को जम्मू कश्मीर में पाकिस्तान द्वारा मारा जा रहा था, यहां पर मिलिटेंसी हो रही थी। मैं समझता हूं कि पाकिस्तान एक फेल्ड स्टेट है, जिसको कोई असूल, कोई भी चीजें वो मानने के लिए, किसी कानून को मानने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। ये ठीक है कि आज उसको यूनाइटेड नेशन से या बाकी जगहों से कर्जे लेने हैं, तो उस वजह से शायद वो थोड़ा बहुत दबाव में आ जाए, लेकिन जो हालात आज पाकिस्तान में है, वहां पर सिख माइनॉरिटी सुरक्षित नहीं है, वहां पर क्रिश्चियन माइनॉरिटी सुरक्षित नहीं है। वहां पर सुरक्षित क्या, मुझे ये बताइए। एक तरह से एक हेल बना हुआ है पाकिस्तान के अंदर, और पूरे देश को, पूरी दुनिया को इकट्ठे होकर आज यूनाइटेड नेशन को छोड़कर पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ खड़े होना चाहिए और सारी दुनिया को दिखाना चाहिए कि पाकिस्तान एक फेल्ड स्टेट है, जो किसी भी मानव अधिकारों का कोई भी वहां पर कोई कदर नहीं करती, उसको कोई मायने नहीं है। तो मैं समझता हूं कि ये एक मौका है, इस समय सभी को खड़े होना चाहिए पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ।
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल ठीक फरमाया आपने एम्बेसडर मुखर्जी। Pakistan has been escaping the FATF sword for quite some time. They've been trying to malign India's reputation at the UN Security Council time and again, but China has always backed them. If UN is not to be trusted, if it's not a viable, a trustable source anymore for voicing international issues, then what is the alternative?
First of all, Vineet, I don't agree with the perception that the UN is not effective anymore. Let me put the record straight. Pakistan has never succeeded in embarrassing India in the United Nations. Pakistani efforts to raise human rights issues in Jammu and Kashmir in the Human Rights Commission, which became Human Rights Council, and I was in Geneva at that time, failed. They were not able to get more than 4 votes. So let me first say, first and foremost, the United Nations has never voted with Pakistan against India in a single UN human rights forum. Please check that out. Secondly, it is not true that a responsible country like India should be impervious to international opinion. If that applies to India, it also applies, and even more, to failed states. A failed state like Pakistan, dependent on aid to prop it up, and its only one friend, China, is dependent on international opinion, because if that international opinion swings against it, as it has actually in the last 5 to 7 years, that does not augur well for Pakistan's deep state. Thirdly, there is no other alternative, because the UN Security Council and the UN Charter form the bedrock of international law. We as India want to become a permanent member of the Security Council, then we cannot, on a responsible media channel, say that we don't care for international law, we don't care for UN, and we don't care for international opinion because they have not been fair to India. They were always fair to Pakistan. No. I have to remind you, Vineet, it was an Indian Prime Minister who took Jammu and Kashmir to the UN. It was not Pakistan. It was a very big strategic error. That was India's mistake. That was not Pakistan's mistake. But since then, India has resolutely, and with its friends and through its diplomacy and through its own soft power has ensured that not a single anti-India resolution has ever been passed in the UN. So I think it is very important not to go into these kind of statements which sound good to the public, but which are not based on facts. We are a responsible country. We are going to be a great power, then we cannot flout international law. And we need international public opinion with us when we will take over the whole of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. We will need international opinion to say, yes, India, you've done a good thing. That's what I wanted to say. Thank
All right. Joyita, you want to respond to that? You did mention in your previous comment that, the trust in UN perhaps has eroded or something to that order.
Yeah, the thing is, you see, I said that, but I also agree, Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee makes perfect sense. But the thing is that while we are talking about India, the kind of negative publicity that has happened against India on international fora, and even for that matter, the UN Secretary General has also talked about, that Article 370 and all that, whether it's not a okay, I mean, a lot of diplomatic maneuvering activities go on to ensure that such resolutions are not passed. But when people like, the UN chief and all, they start talking about it, it does send out a wrong message to the world. But of course, I'm certain our diplomats will be able to take care of that. As for in terms of Pakistan, when you're talking about Pakistan, the thing is, you see, in spite of efforts on our part, the fact is that Pakistan, which is actually a rogue country, a terrorist nation, we still have not been able to ensure the blacklisting of Pakistan. You see, and that is what is needed. The Pakistan needs to go to the blacklist. Of course, it is primarily because of countries like Turkey and China and all that. But the thing is, you see, there must be something wrong in the mechanism, in these mechanisms. I mean, what is the point in terms of unless and until you are able to punish certain rogue states? I think it needs to be more proactive. And Pakistan is a complete rogue state when it comes to its treatment of minorities, when it comes to its treatment of journalists. So I think the world bodies need to be more proactive about this.
All right, Sumit, how do you respond to that? You also hail from Kashmir. And Mr. Chunni did mention that there was, in fact, some issue with the way the UN perhaps might have responded to the Pakistani atrocities, which were incurred on, a certain group of people.
The point here is that when you talk of UNHRC, what does the American president, with due respect to the ambassador here and our diplomats have done a fantastic job, what does the American president Donald Trump refer to as UNHRC? He says it's a cesspool of bias. This is not my words, this is what the American president said, and we are exiting UNHRC because it is making no sense. As far as the UNSC is concerned, Vineet, now, isn't it true that autocratic China is hijacking the agenda? Isn't it true with 1/6 of the world's population, we are not permanent member of UNSC? Does UNSC make any sense with China being a permanent member of the Security Council and vetoing everything in our interest when they have a conflict of interest with us because they have a border dispute with us? So with these things, UN was made in 1947. The laws are outdated. That time, the power center was Europe. It is Europe-centric laws. 4 members, 3 out of the 5, 3 members come from the Europe. And one is China, one is US. Now the things have changed. Geopolitics has changed. Situation has changed. It needs a revamp. Because with these outdated laws, we cannot expect a lot to happen. We'll be always in a defensive. We'll be trying to, shield ourselves from the offensive. That's all we have been doing for these many years. I'm saying we have done a fantastic job, but the time has come that we really call out. We ask for our pound of flesh because being 1/6 of the humanity, being the 3rd biggest economy with PPP and 5th by GDP, why we don't have a UNSC permanent seat? And why do we let communist regimes handle the world stage? FATA China, UNSC China. So the world has to decide, how long can we let a communist China hijack the world bodies and the world stage? That's the biggest...
I would like to clarify this point, Vineet. I would like to clarify this point and tell my friend Sumit that once again it was an Indian Prime Minister who refused the offer made to India to take China's permanent seat in the Security Council. Whose fault was it? We refused it. We said it is not gentlemanlike behavior. So who do we have to blame but ourselves? Please acknowledge that first. Huh?
Yes.
When you are saying, you are regretting, and I regret with you, that we are not in a position to call the shots in the Security Council or to control China. Is China grateful that an Indian Prime Minister said, no, it is not gentlemanlike behavior for India to take China's vacant seat. So when you talk of history, give all the facts, Sumit. The public needs to know. The public needs to know that it was India who refused the seat.
My
needs to know that. You must say that when you say that next time.
Point taken, ma'am. Absolutely. After
very important point.
Kashmir has never been discussed in UNSC after 64. For 60 years, it has not been discussed.
I
right?
agree with you.
So that is the point I agree. And it was Jawaharlal Nehru who did that. We all know the name.
That's not the point. The point is we should have been in the Security Council.
We should have been. But isn't it time to change that outdated rules? Can we live for 60 years with that?
But Ambassador, what Sumit is trying to say is that, does that historical error absolve the UN of course correction?
Correct.
Of course not. But who is vetoing our entry? We've got full support. Who is vetoing it? Vineet? China.
China?
And China has the veto. Because when we enter the Security Council as a permanent member, all permanent members have to agree. So what have we done to ourselves? All the other 4 members have agreed. And China is vetoing it. So until we can get around this problem, we can become a permanent member without the veto. But we want the veto. What's the point of being a permanent member without the veto? If they have the veto, we have to have the veto. It's as simple as that. That's where the negotiation is stuck.
Vineet, I have a quick point to make.
I agree it's time for a course correction, of course.
I agree. Vineet, I have a point to make. Why can't we ask in UNSC, you can't do absolute vote, go by majority vote. If 4 out of 5 are agreeing to something, the rule must change then. You have to accommodate the current
geopolitical. There's a thing, Sumit, called the UN Charter.
Yeah.
And change that, It's like the Indian Constitution. It has to be amended by majority. Can't be done.
We'll wrap up. Yeah, go ahead, Sumit, make your point.
Vineet, that's the only point, because in 60 years, the things have changed. From 47, we are talking around 70 years now. The position of India has changed. Our stature, our needs, our demands have changed. Isn't it time to go and introspect? Is this UNSC and UNHRC still a potent force what it was in 1940s when it was made? Is the geopolitical situation same? No. And can we let the communist regime, my point is, can we let the communist regime hijack all the global bodies, what we're seeing them doing at UNSC, FATA, and everything is China all the way. How long can this continue?
That note, we'll have to dip in.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.